You were there.
I was gonna be there regardless.
Yeah, it's 100%.
As long as the numbers.
It's real.
Which is why I'm wondering, you guys are recovering money.
Yeah.
Less than
No,
that,
this is, yeah, big
we're
news.
gonna win that first.
Fordyce. No, you still doesn't. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Ready. Good afternoon. I'm Colonel Mike Hager. I appreciate you coming. Every trooper in my organization has heard me use the following quote: "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to face violence on their behalf." Although the community of Fordyce experienced unspeakable violence on Friday, we're blessed by God to have rough men who stood ready and they raced to take care of their fellow citizens. Officers were on scene in less than 3 minutes. From the time the first shot was fired and the time the suspect was down was less than 5 minutes. The primary thing I want to do today is thank the 6 law enforcement officers who were on the scene during the shooting. All of them were either with the Fordyce Police Department or the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. One of the officers worked for both agencies. These men worked together to stop the man, who I'll refer to as the suspect, as I walk you through a summary of what occurred. These men responded to a call from civilians who were taking fire. These civilians were their friends and their neighbors. They all had active shooter training, and most of them had prior military experience. These officers used that experience in their years of public service to eliminate the threat quickly. We know the suspect arrived at the Mad Butcher armed with a 12-gauge shotgun and a pistol. The suspect also had a bandolier with dozens of extra shotgun rounds on his person. We believe most, if not all, of the rounds fired by the suspect were from the shotgun. We believe he immediately began engaging victims in the parking lot after exiting his truck and then proceeded into the store. Once inside, he was firing indiscriminately at both customers and employees. When law enforcement arrived on scene, the suspect exited the store and the officers redirected his attention towards them and immediately engaged in a firefight with law enforcement, where they were able to stop the threat. During the incident, we observed the very best and the very worst of humanity. As an example, instead of fleeing from the obvious danger, Callie Weems began using her training as a nurse to render aid to a gunshot victim, and unfortunately became a victim herself as a result of her selfless actions. The actions of the suspect were the most cowardly, pathetic actions imaginable, as he was literally preying on defenseless victims, the majority of which were female. Due to the quick response of law enforcement, they turned the hunter into the hunted. These officers range from a police officer who has not even yet attended basic law enforcement training to the Dallas County Sheriff Mike Canadle, who has almost 40 years of law enforcement experience. These officers literally and intentionally put themselves between the suspects and defenseless citizens. Their actions were nothing short of heroic. After the threat was neutralized, they immediately began rendering aid and coordinating medical attention and the evacuation of the injured. At this time, the suspect's motives are unclear, and that's obviously going to be a focus of our investigation. Right now, our priorities are twofold. The first being the successful prosecution of the suspect and making sure he's held accountable for his despicable actions. The second is to ensure the community of Fordyce and the citizens of Dallas County receive the support and prayers that they so desperately need. Please understand that there may be some information we cannot release at this time because we want to protect the integrity of the investigation. The Department of Public Safety Wellness Unit was immediately deployed to provide support and counseling services to the law enforcement personnel involved and to the family of the victims. We've had dozens of special agents from the state police and troopers from the Highway Patrol Division that have worked tirelessly in support of the Fordyce Police Department and the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. We've also received support from many other law enforcement agencies, to include our federal partners, that have offered any assistance needed. I want to thank you to our media partners for your sensitive coverage of these events. We appreciate your patience and understanding as information trickles slowly in such a chaotic event. We ask that you continue to give the Fordyce community their appropriate space as they process these events. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes, sir.
You're good with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Do we know if the suspect had any previous criminal history at all?
I don't know specifically, but my understanding is his criminal history is very limited, if there's any at all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. There was we believe, a Stuttgart police officer that arrived during the scene or during the events that did help render aid to officers and other victims at the scene.
And he was one of the officers that was shot?
Actually, no, he was not. There's going to be a press release that will update that information. I believe that during the chaos of this, the wrong information was released on the identity of the second officer that was injured, but it was not the Stuttgart police officer.
Dr. Fordyce with News 92.7 FM in Camden. It's rumored, it's not confirmed, that Sheriff Mike Nadel shot the shooter, and the shooter was transferred to Washita County Correctional Center. Is it because that Sheriff Nadel shot the suspect that it would be a conflict of interest, or to be more transparent, to keep him in a different jail system, and the event that something happened that they would question what would happen to him versus putting him in neutral territory?
Right. Sheriff Canadle was engaged in the firefight with the suspect. However, I don't believe that led to the decision of him being transferred to the Washita County unit. I think there was just some separation needed there. There were so many people involved in local law enforcement that we just needed to have a little bit of separation in space. You have to understand, this is particularly difficult for this law enforcement community, for the entire community. But kind of in contrast to some active shooter situations or mass shootings that we've seen around the country that may occur in, say, a large metropolitan area. The thing that makes this so personal and so difficult is that these officers and deputies that responded to the scene, these are their friends, their neighbors. One thing that stuck out to me as I've reviewed some of the statements from the officers involved, from the victims involved, they don't refer to them, to the victims generically. They're calling them by name. They know these people. They're their friends. They're their neighbors. They're their families. So it makes it particularly difficult in a situation like this. With they knew everyone personally, from the suspect to the victims on scene. So it makes it very difficult. Yes, sir.
Susie Parker with South Arkansas Reckoning. I live in South Arkansas. There's an ongoing rumor that was multiple shooters. Can you confirm definitely there was only one shooter?
Yes, ma'am. There was only one shooter.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Rebecca Lett, THV11. You talked about there's not a motive quite yet, but we know that the shooter was from that community, and you did kind of mention that the victims were predominantly female. Was there any relation that he wanted to revenge, get a backup certain people with them being a close-knit community, or why we don't quite know the motive quite yet?
Right. It's unclear to us as well. I can tell you from what we've seen, there appears to be no personal connection to the shooter or any of the victims. He simply started engaging victims indiscriminately, just as targets of opportunity. It didn't appear that it was focused at any one person or focused at the entity of the Mad Butcher or anything like that. It was just a completely random, senseless act.
And forgive me, I had 2 questions. You also mentioned Callie Williams. Was she shot because she was helping others on the scene? Was that kind of, I wanted to clarify that right there. I think you had mentioned her earlier.
I can tell you that she was shot while rendering aid to another gunshot victim. Instead of fleeing the store, she stopped to render aid in one of the most selfless acts I've ever seen. Yes, ma'am.
Kayla Christian with Channel 7. Do we know if there was any previous medical history with mental health for the suspect?
No, ma'am. I'm not aware of that. That's obviously something that will be the focus of the investigation. Yes, ma'am.
Alexis Birch, Channel 4 and 16. Do you have a number of rounds that were fired, or also a duration of the event?
We know from the 911 call until the radio call that the suspect was down was less than 5 minutes. As far as the number of rounds, I would just say dozens were fired.
And on that note, can you say what kind of ammunition was used?
That's going to be part of the investigation, but it appears that the majority of the rounds fired by the suspect were buckshot. Yes, ma'am.
Channel 7. Do you know if there worse off since then?
No, ma'am. Of course, you can understand, even though these are victims of a crime, HIPAA laws still apply. And so we're limited on the information that we can either receive or put out. We do know that we still have multiple victims that are in local hospitals in the Little Rock area, and we do know that at least one is listed in critical condition. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so a lot of the actions taken by law enforcement has been described as heroic. Are you able to detail at all what kind of went down or what their response was?
You know, just the fact that they literally position themselves between the shooter and helpless victims. They, in aid to each other, in aid to victims on the scene, it was just an amazing response. The Fordyce Police Department and the Dallas County Sheriff's Department should be commended. Their actions were no less than heroic. When you look at the scene and the way things unfolded, it can't be overstated how heroic their actions were.
Are prosecutors seeking the death penalty?
That would kind of be outside of my lane to discuss, but my understanding is that he has been charged currently with 3 counts of capital murder, and of course those charges will be updated. But with the capital murder charge, the death penalty would be on the table.
Is he going to continue to be held at Washington County for the foreseeable future?
I would imagine yes.
And then you addressed the hospitalization question, I know, but on the press release yesterday, I believe you mentioned that there were still 3 others. I think it said there's one person in critical condition at UMS, 3 others who are still hospitalized. Can you tell us, are all 3 of those being treated here in Little Rock? Are they still some folks in Dallas County or what?
My understanding is the ones that are still hospitalized are in Little Rock area hospitals.
Do you know
Yes,
when the arraignment will be?
No, ma'am, I do not. I believe that there has been some type of first appearance hearing that has taken place, but as far as the actual arraignment or any other court proceedings, I'm not sure on that. Yes, ma'am.
Was the suspect wearing any kind of body armor or protection?
No, ma'am, we don't believe he was. Yes.
Have you all been able to obtain any surveillance footage or anything to find out exactly when it started?
There is surveillance footage inside the grocery store, but not in the parking lot. But you can gather from the events and the actions of the people inside the store kind of a time frame of when the shooting began. Yes, sir.
What do you know about the suspect? Did he have any sort of formal injunction, anything like that prior to this?
No, sir, not that we're aware of at this time.
And was it protocol to actually, I guess I would say this kind of rare situation that the suspect is still alive during a mass shooting like this, was that something, a protocol or so that we wanted to take him in to custody? Or,
I'm sorry, say that one more
I
time.
guess my question is, normally sometimes when you see these situations, naturally the suspect is, I hate the lack of words, dead on the scene.
Right.
Or inflicted gun wound or self. But
Right.
we saw this one in a rare case that he was just injured, but he was taken to custody.
Yes, ma'am.
Any just protocol right there, or was that intended to just wound him and get him down and take him into custody?
Right. No, ma'am. The intent of the officers is simply to stop the threat. Once the threat was neutralized, they also rendered aid to the suspect, and of course he was immediately taken in custody, and he has been under constant law enforcement supervision since that time.
Maybe one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Kate Long with the Camden News. We have heard that the suspect may have been banned from the Madam Butcher grocery store. Is that the case, or is that just a rumor?
I believe that's just a rumor. We've heard nothing, been able to verify nothing that he had any type of interaction or had been banned from the store. We've heard that rumor, but we've not been able to verify anything like that.
You never worked there?
Sir,
You never worked there?
I've not been notified if that's the case. Okay. Thank you.